This is Chick2Chick Uncut, raw and unfiltered.
Back in 1967, Aretha Franklin came out with this song, and I think you know how it goes. RESPECT, find out what it means to me. She was singing about respect. She was saying, hey, I'm out here, I'm doing my thing, and all I'm asking for is just a little bit of respect. Well, here we are some 60 years later, and it seems like we have zero respect in every facet of our lives, whether it's marriage, relationships, friendships, work, school. Oh, and yeah, that big one, politics. We have lost our way. We are so disrespectful to one another. And it begs the question, why? How did we get to this point? Why are we so disrespectful? And here's a big one. How do we get it back? That brings us to our guest today, Amanda Levison. She is a licensed professional counselor with Neurofeedback and Counseling Center of Central Pennsylvania. Amanda, it's been a while, but thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Love to have you here. Let's talk about the very, very basics of what is respect. What's the definition of respect?
So respect would be the golden rule, right? Treat people how you want to be treated. It's so important that even when you're frustrated, that you speak in a way that is in a positive way, that would not be insulting someone or putting them down, but instead articulating yourself in a way that you would want to be heard in that same facet.
So I've named this podcast The Lost Art of Respect. Is respect really an art form?
It can be. So just like art develops over time and it's a skill set, respect, not everyone naturally has that as they're young if they're not being taught that. But they can learn it and they can enhance ways of how we respect people and how we respect ourselves.
Okay, so let's break this down. I was talking in the intro to this podcast about various ways that people disrespect each other. And I want to start with the biggie. Marriage. I see so many spouses disrespecting each other. I see husbands saying horrible things to their wife and vice versa. The other thing that seems to be so commonplace is that people take to social media, whether it's Facebook or any other platform, and they're on there, airing their dirty laundry and disrespecting their spouse and saying, he did this and he did that and he went here. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you doing that? And I want you to explain, why are husbands and wives so disrespectful to each other, and how detrimental is this to a marriage?
So it's very detrimental, first of all, but this is so loaded. When I think back of my grandparents in that generation, typically it was the male that worked and the woman was more submissive and the home giver of every sort, right? And now, through generations, women have had more women empowerment. They are professionals in the field, and there's more of a balance between the two, where they both are contributing to the household. And the stereotypes of it is sometimes it could hurt someone's ego, right? If they want to be the caretaker and maybe the other one is stepping up more in another way, or financially, if a woman is more successful than the man, that can also cause an imbalance at times. So it's really important that people check their ego. And sometimes that's about, working it through on themselves, or they need the assistance with a professional to work on their own things. And the other part of it is, historically, the way that we are in our relationships is what has been modeled for us. So, back in the day where it was more acceptable to be stricter as a form of discipline, generationally, that has been passed down, where people are now learning that some of that strictness is not okay. And they're having to kind of recreate that, of what they would like. And if they didn't like something when they were growing up, how can they change that? Going to Facebook, to answer your question, to blast someone, once you put it out on the internet, it's out there, right? And people are aware of it. So it's very hard to go back into the relationship feeling comfortable and to restore that part. So the one thing to think of within a marriage is, why did you get married? And over time, that may change of your reasons for the why. But ultimately, no one gets married to get divorced. So it's to focus on that and to focus on the strength of the relationship. And if you don't have any strength within it, is how do you find that strength? How do you find that commitment to each other to be able to go through with it and respect each other?
And ultimately, everybody has a different definition of love.
Yes.
And for me, love is respect. I mean, if you're not respecting me, I don't feel like you love me.
Yes.
Is there any truth to that?
There's a question with that.
Okay.
There is, but we all define respect differently, right? So I would think being respectful to someone is treating me how you want to be treated. But someone else may have a completely different form of respect and definition in any capacity, whether that is in a marriage or in a friendship or in a work environment or any other way. So that's where it's really important to have that communication with people of what does respect look like. And in a job, there could be standards of what is required or expected in a job. But just like a job, marriage is work. And so it's communicating that. What is respect to me? What is respect to you? So we can make sure that we're both feeling respected in this role.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. And you sort of brought it up. Friendships and even relationships. And I think that people don't realize that little things happen between friendships, and it chips away at it. So, the friend maybe who is always 2 hours late, or the friend who says, hey, I'll call you back, and they don't call back for 3 days, or the friend who says, meet me for lunch, and then they don't show up, and they're like, whatever, something came up, it's no big deal. I find that all to be disrespectful. Is it?
Yes, but on the other hand, it's someone who struggles with time management, right? So there's a difference between being up to a certain point late. If someone is consistently always 5 to 10 minutes late, you could say that's the way they are, but they're such a good person, they're such a good friend, and you overlook that. Standing you up or being an hour late, like extended periods of time, one, it's lack of time management. It's not valuing your time, and therefore you're interpreting it as disrespect, but they may have so much in their life. So it comes to, are they really being a friend to you, or is it that they were squeezing you in and they felt obligated and didn't really have that time commitment? So it's really important to understand the perspective of why they continue to be late and have you addressed it with them.
Yeah, but I also feel like if they don't show up and don't bother to call or tell you I'm not showing up, or they're consistently late, to me, it's almost saying like my life is more important than your life. And
Correct.
it's no
Standing
big deal.
Up.
Yeah.
Yeah, standing someone up, it just shows that that's not someone that is valuing you as an individual, whether that is through work, whether that is through your personal life. If someone is standing you up, they are not valuing the time.
Okay. Here's another big one. Parenting.
Yeah.
I am shocked sometimes when I see children talking to their parents in a disrespectful way, and the parent does nothing. I'm not even talking about little kids. I'm talking about teenagers. I'm talking about 20-somethings, and the way they talk to their parents. And I have actually done this, that I've been in a situation with a friend and their child, their adult child, speaking to their parent in such a disrespectful way. And I'll say, hey, don't talk to your mother that way. Why do kids these days feel like it's okay to talk to their mom and dad so disrespectfully?
I think a few things are happening. One is the environment, in the sense that kids, are influenced by other kids or by the TV. And so they pick up on ways in their words that they're saying at any age, right? And the other part is boundaries and a lack of boundaries and respect. And so you could say that I respect you, I value, I love you as a parent, as a child, however that may be. But setting clear boundaries is so important. And sometimes what I see is that when people set boundaries, the person giving the boundary, the other person is not okay with that. So that's where there's that push-pull, especially with adult children, in the sense of if you were to say, this is not acceptable for me, or I am not okay with this, and the other person really struggles with that, now you're going to have that that kind of back and forth relationship.
So what should a parent do if their 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old is talking to them in a disrespectful manner? I see a lot of parents just go silent in frustration, not knowing what to do. How do you handle something like that?
One is to communicate and to set those clear boundaries. You know, I am not okay with you speaking to me this way, and this cannot happen again. When they're little, it's very easy to be able to set that and set a firm boundary. Screaming your head off or, you know, extreme punishment is not going to get very far. But saying, you know, you hurt my feelings when you did X, Y, Z is going to go a lot further. Or you didn't like it when, you know, so-and-so at school did this. Well, how do you think you made mommy feel when you did this to me? You know, kind of make them hear and see your position. It is hard for them to understand someone else's perspective. So sometimes giving an example would be more helpful.
Do you take that same approach with an adult child? I know you can't talk to them the same way as you would be talking to a 5-year-old,
Yeah.
but how do you handle the 20-something in your life who's being disrespectful to you?
Well, sometimes that's creating space, right? I don't like the way that you were speaking to me, and I'm willing to talk about it when you're ready to resolve this. Or I don't like the way you're speaking to me. It's not okay to speak to me this way. And when you could speak to me in a better position, I will gladly accept your call, text, whatever that may be. But setting that clear boundary of, you know, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable.
So maybe I'm old school, and I am
Okay.
old school. I'm just going to admit it. Yeah, I'm old school. Sometimes when a child, a 5-year-old, comes up to me and says, "Hey, Flora." So I was always raised, and I raised my son the same way, that when you're speaking to an adult, you need to address them either, "Hello, Mr. So-and-so," or, you know, I would teach my son to call my friend Miss Tina or Miss Katie, and their children addressed me the same way, Miss Flora. I mean, you don't need to go to that extreme of Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, but I felt like just adding that salutation was telling the child, this is the way you respect adults. And this is crazy. I mean, I still address adults who I knew as a child as Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. And when I'm talking to my son, I still say, "Hey, I was with Miss Tina today," or, "Oh, hey, I was with Miss Katie today." And he still addresses them that way. Like I said, I'm old school, but is that important to teach a child to address an adult that way?
So it depends your relationship, I think. And it's funny that you say this because when I was a child, my neighbors, the kids were maybe 10 years older than me, and they had a Southern accent and, you know, very Southern-like and Southern hospitality. And these boys used to say to my mom, you know, Mrs., you know, and all that. And it was one of those things, I don't know if they were saying her first name or if they were saying Mrs. Levison, but whatever it was, they were saying, you know, her name with a Mrs. And my mom thought it was the funniest thing that, like, in hindsight, that I would say hi and their first names, because it was a difference of how we were raised. And, you know, I was never disrespectful to these neighbors. I was always very kind. And with my own children, I have maybe one friend that they say Miss in front of, or Mr. And like one of like my very dear friends, it's a family friend, they refer to as like aunt and the name, you know, but everyone else is by first name basis. And I don't think it's a disrespectful thing. I think it's a generational thing too, with those stereotypes of, you know, different generations of calling Miss and Mr. and having that line. It depends how they say it. Like for me, when people say like, "Hey, what's up?" in a text, like I feel like, hey, you're kind of like, what's the hey for? It's a little too casual rather than like, "Hi, how's your day going?" You know, so I think it's all what's your expectations?
I expect to be called Miss Flora by a 4-year-old.
I'll make sure I tell my kids when they see you.
I told you I'm old school. All right, let's, speaking of old school, let's head into the classroom now and talk about the disrespect. again, I find it appalling. Sometimes I walk the halls at schools or I have to go to a school. And in fact, we did a podcast with a foreign exchange student. She was here from Italy. And she came on the podcast and I asked her, what was something that struck her about school in America? And the first thing she said was she is shocked by how disrespectful kids are in the classroom in America versus in Italy. That when you're in the classroom in Italy and the teacher walks in, everybody stands up to show the teacher respect.
Yeah.
She was also talking about the way American children dress. And she felt like even the dress was disrespectful because in Italy they go to school dressed properly. Is there a big problem with respect in our schools and disrespect of the way students talk to teachers? And again, why are they getting away with this?
Yeah, so I think there's so many components with it. When it comes to attire, I know for me, when I was a child, there was a dress code. And I tend to dress more modest, so it's one of those things that, I always followed. But on the other hand, you're still going to see the girls in crop tops, and they could argue that that's all that's out there. Where I don't own any crop tops, so I know that there's other clothing out there, So it goes to respecting themselves and their environment. A lot of times when kids are not respected at home, they are not respectful to other people. That whole theory of like the bully is being bullied, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other part of it is, as I shared before with the boundaries, if there are not clear boundaries that are being made, if there are not clear consequences, well, this one said it, so why isn't it okay if I say it, right? And so they catch up on it, and the negative influences of others really do pick up on the way we act and behave, especially when they're trying to identify who they are. But what I'm finding most of all is that people are struggling internally when they are behaving in such a way.
So it's not about the teacher, it's about them and what they're feeling inside, and they're projecting it onto the teacher. Is that what you're saying?
It could be a lot of the times, right? Sometimes there could be teachers that are not setting the boundary and kids are testing that, and the teacher has maybe been difficult of a teacher. So there could be other components to it. But overall, yeah, I do think that there's a lot more with the individual internally and just the influences that's happening.
And I feel like teachers are afraid these days to say anything and to say, hey, don't talk to me that way. I'm your teacher. I feel like they're going to school and they're living in fear in their own classroom.
There are certain things about that. So before I was a therapist, I was an 8th grade language arts teacher. So I was in the classroom to see the difference among the kids and the different trends. And one of the things that I was taught in the trainings is like if there's a fight, for instance, in school, that I was not allowed to touch a student because then it could be misconstrued in any way. So I can't break it up. Don't get involved. Just calls for security. And I say that in the sense that the kids know that they could push your buttons and that we can't because it would be the script will get flipped on us, right? And so it's one of those things that someone is afraid for their career, they're afraid for their profession as a whole. And so there's only so much they can do. However, there are consequences in a school environment where if you are setting that boundary, you're teaching the kids respect, you're giving them respect. And if they're not, well, then they could be sent to the principal or they could be sent to the guidance counselor or they could get detention or suspended or expelled. There's things in place in the school system to make sure that kids are behaving. Whether the teacher is choosing to enforce it or not, that's their choice.
Okay, let's talk about the disrespect at work now. I'm just amazed on a constant how I'll send somebody an email. They don't even respond. Just give me 10 seconds to say thanks, but no thanks. That's one thing that they don't even respond to emails. They don't return phone calls. And the other thing that just is, I can't understand this. I have a friend who works in HR, and she'll say to me, we have people who accept jobs, and then the first day of work, they don't show up. They don't even show up. They don't call. They don't text. They don't say, hey, I'm not interested anymore. They just don't show up. Why is there so much disrespect in the work environment?
I think that a lot goes into how you are raised, the environment you're raised, and how you're taught. So, for instance, I remember in high school, one of my classes, I don't remember this specific class, they were teaching us how to shake hands in a job interview. And it was very detailed of the specifics of it. And we went around and they were saying, in a business world, this is how you shake hands. And we had to like practice and get it down. And I have a good handshake thanks to that teacher that taught me in, I think, 11th or 12th grade. And I say that because I don't think everyone is taught. I've had people come in for an interview in jeans. I've had people not show up for an interview. I've had people that have accepted the job and have not shown up. So, and these are at, having a master's to, being a therapist. And I say that because you can't say that it's an educational thing or, higher education, they may be more respectful because one would hope, but it's really everyone. Any level of degree, I think people are just not valuing others' time and not valuing the situation at hold or the profession if they can go in like that. And I think it's important that, people do teach them the right way, but they won't know if, what do they think is different than any other? If they could leave this job, they're going to leave the next job. If they're going to come in an interview in jeans, they're going to go to the next interview in jeans. Same kind of thing.
Okay, so then you just said you've had people not show up for interviews or show up for interviews in jeans. Do you then reach out to them and say, hey, you didn't even show up? I mean, do you say something to them to let them know that this is wrong? Like, what do you do? How do you handle that?
Yeah. So actually I had one was in the last few months, and it was actually funny because there's a generic, you did not show up, so unfortunately, this position is no longer available for you. And then they actually reapplied later on, like a week or two later. So I just automatically rejected it. And I think if it was, I'm sorry, this came up and I had a true emergency, showing an eagerness. But, I had someone years ago that did that and it seemed humble. And then the next time they did it again. So I said, I'm not interested, I'm not looking to have someone waste my time because in my profession, people are coming in for appointments. So if you're not going to value someone else's time, especially your boss, how are you going to value someone that's coming in that could be in a potential vulnerable position?
Why do they think that's okay? Why does somebody think that it's okay not to show up for a job interview and not even message? Why do they think it's okay to actually accept a job and then not even show up for work?
I hope these people hear this podcast.
Me too.
They could be called out on it. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lot of times also that people are looking for the next best thing rather than saying let me invest my time and see if this could be the best thing for me.
Yeah, but it takes 10 seconds.
Right.
It takes 10 seconds to say thanks, but no thanks.
Correct.
I don't get that. Okay, Amanda, let's get strapped in. We got to go there. Politics.
Okay.
What is going on? There's so much destruction, so many families divided, so many friendships ended over politics, and a lot of times arguing about somebody they don't even know, somebody who's in office who has no impact. Why can't we have civil conversations anymore? Why can't we say, I hear you, but I don't agree with you and I respectfully disagree with you. Why are we taking this to such extremes that families are people aren't talking to each other, brothers and sisters are arguing, what's going on?
Okay.
Taking
a breath on this one.
Okay, I need to take a deep breath on this one.
So I was raised in a way that you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about money. Those are the three things you never talk about in a workplace or in your relationships. And I say that because it's a different generation now. And people are not doing those three things, and they all talk about those three things. And it's okay to agree to disagree. But I think what's happening is people don't think it's okay to disagree. And I think it's different to have differing opinions and kind of saying, like, I understand your perspective, I don't feel the same way, versus demanding. And what I hear a lot of is there's values that are in question with politics. And I think that the political stance looks very different than it did when I was younger. And so it's a very difficult topic to talk about in a safe grounds, in the sense that I think there's no neutral, where like people used to say, like, I prefer this side or that side, but I'd be happy either way, or they didn't feel as strong. Where I feel that the recent elections, people have been much more involved with.
But why take it to such an extreme that you're willing to end a 30-year friendship because I think one way and you think another way? I don't understand that. How could something be that important that, you have a relationship with somebody for 30 years, 40 years, and now you're just saying, I don't want anything to do with you?
I think that there's certain topics that people avoid when they know someone has a different opinion. And so you could maintain that friendship if you're like, well, we're going to talk about everything except this, or we're not going to go into this. But certain views have been brought up that really are not easy to escape the conversation. And I say that in so many components. So when people are in fear of different situations, it is a constant conversation and it is on their mind. And that's where people are really struggling.
It's funny. You said when you were raised, you don't talk about politics. I'm a member of the Elks Club. There's a big sign that says, no politics. Don't talk about politics. And I think they're right to have that sign up, especially based on what you just said. Here's a big one, too. It doesn't seem like people have self-respect anymore. And
Correct.
my view is, if you don't respect yourself, how can you respect anybody else?
Yeah.
And there are all levels of that. I'm just amazed on a constant basis. Again, when I look at social media, when I look at Facebook, and these young girls, or even boys, or even adult women or adult men posing scantily clad, they're in their underwear. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why do they do this? And why are we at this point that we lack self-respect?
So self-respect is something that we learn as children when we're feeling confident in who we are. As we grow up and the outside influences, it changes the way that we feel about ourselves, right? So, for instance, if you have big poofy hair as a child and you never noticed it, and then the kids start teasing you on it, now you're going to have perfectly hair as you grow up, right? But you're always going to be paranoid. Oh my gosh, the poofy hair. I can't ever let my hair get poofy again. And I say that because when you've worked out those issues, someone else could say, oh yeah, I was a kid. I had poofy hair. I learned how to maintain it, and now I'm in a good position. So I think that when we're kids, the things that are said to us really stick with us. And if we resolve it, it really helps. If we haven't, then we're looking for validation from others. So if it was someone that never felt pretty enough, or they never felt good enough, and now they're getting the attention on social media or from, their preferred choice of dating, and everyone's giving them the attention, it feels pretty good. It's like it's a booster of our ego. And it's always short term. I was talking to someone recently who was on a dating app, and they said, I'm really struggling. I said, well, what are you showing in your pictures? To me, you're not showing someone who wants to settle down. To me, you're showing someone who is cute and fun and wants to have a fun time. Go out and, go to the beach and have fun, which is great to do in relationships. But it's also about what are you conveying. And it's important that when people are posting things, you need to think of, what am I conveying to others? Am I showing what I'm hoping to achieve? So if you're showing stuff in a bikini and you're trying to get a professional job, but you're struggling getting that professional job, maybe it's time to look at, maybe I shouldn't be posting pictures of my bikini out there because this might be taken in a different way.
Yeah,
you're just not only talking aware.
You're not just talking about self-respect here. You're also talking about self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like, are you aware of what you're doing? And you say things and it sparks things in my head. The self-respect is something that it is kind of created or established in childhood. I was raised by immigrant Italian parents, and our household was so strict. And everything that we did or didn't do, I remember my mother and father saying to myself and to my brothers, don't do that. You're going to embarrass the family. Don't do this.
Yeah.
You're going to embarrass this one. Don't do that. You're going to embarrass. And I lived my life to a fault, worried about bringing embarrassment to my mom and dad, bringing embarrassment to the family. And so that was created at a very, very, and it's still with me now. Like, I'm afraid to do anything, and I'm old now, and I'm still afraid of what the ramification would be. And it's not even just the embarrassment to my family. I don't want to embarrass my son.
Yeah.
I'm worried about
But that's still
him.
your family. It's your family in a different capacity.
Correct. So we have gone over all of this, and we have established the disrespect on all levels here. But here's the $1 million question, Amanda. How do we get back respect? How do we get people to understand that this is this is so essential for our lives? How do we get back, and how do we make Aretha Franklin happy?
Well, they have to listen to this podcast, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that one is to teach young children what respect is and what does that look like. I think it's important to really establish our own boundaries of our comfort so we don't feel triggered by others to be disrespectful, and to make sure that we're communicating. And if we feel that we really are struggling, that speak with a therapist, work with someone who can help you to identify where your triggers are and how you can, control yourself in a way when you need to, when you feel out of control. And to work on our self-esteem as well, which again, through therapy that could help, or reading self-help books can also help. But if you don't have that awareness, you wouldn't know that you're doing it. So it's gaining the awareness is number one.
All right. And as we wrap up this podcast, any final thoughts that you have about this such an important topic, respect?
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful topic. And I think that the biggest thing to do is with your loved ones is to really identify what is respect. How do I show you respect? How can I give you respect? And, make that list. And if you feel that you're struggling in a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, work relationship, it's to really identify how you would identify respect. And so it could work more cohesively.
Amanda Levison, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Loved having you here. Again, Aretha Franklin said it best, RESPECT. Find out what it means to me. It's a very simple word. We've lost our way, and we need to find that respect once again. And you can show me a little bit of respect. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chick2Chick USA. That way, every time we come out with a new podcast episode, you're going to get a little alert on your phone so you know to watch out for that. Again, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you all have a great day. And please take the time to respect one another.